Welcome. This is Gary Sultan, Chief of R&D and creator of IOP Technology. This video examines how biochemical dependency can be managed by altering an information processing strategy. The video draws on both evidence-based and applied research. The complete research papers are available for your review. You can get both at the iop.com website. It is generally recognized that as alcoholics recover, their worldview changes. You will get over 2 million hits if you enter the words alcoholism and worldview into the Google search engine. Okay, not all of them are relevant, but something's going on. Unfortunately, the term worldview has a lot of different meanings. There are many opinions and little in the way of evidence-based research. So let's try to change that. To do that, let's start at the beginning. It is absolutely certain that information processing lies at the base of any worldview. The world has a lot of stuff in it, and there are 5 senses through which that stuff can be perceived. That generates a lot of data on any subject. So, everyone has to choose to pay attention to some things and ignore others. In other words, they have to select their input. And then they have to figure out what that input means. Is color important? Was a comment an insult or just a failed attempt at humor? Information has to be processed to give meaning to anything. Finally, people have to figure out what to do with their interpreted input. That means they have to decide on some kind of output. Are they going to act, delay, plan? There are a lot of options. IOP technology reduces all input, process, output combinations into a simple profile. This profile lies at the core of any definition of worldview. So, how do we know that this IOP profile actually works? Well, for one thing, the theory that underlies IOP is fully validated. You can even buy a book on it. Or, you can read it for free at our research website at oeinstitute.org. You can trust IOP results. But perhaps most importantly, IOP has been field tested by thousands of organizations. The technology works in practice as well as in theory. So, how does this apply to recovering alcoholics? Here are the results from a 103-person sample of Alcoholics Anonymous members. This is the average information processing profile of people who have been sober for 12 months or less. And this is the profile of people who have been sober from 1 to 3 years. Let's put them together and see what changed. First, let's look at the parts of the profile that have declined. The reactive stimulator style dropped most. This style typically relies on unpatterned input. Paying attention to whatever is most visible. The processing element focuses on charting a quick action-oriented response. The net result is expedient action. What we see here is a 21% decline in this quick-on-the-trigger type of response. The relational innovator style focuses on novelty, creativity, and discovery, and drops by 4%. This small change probably does not have much to do with maintaining sobriety in this initial phase. So, what are the IOP styles that increased? The biggest bounce was in the logical processor or LP style. This style pays attention to things that have been predetermined to be important. Processing concentrates on charting an exact path with a certain outcome. What we see is a whopping 43% increase in these measured and methodical responses. Action has changed in character. It has moved from impulsive to disciplined action. There is also an 11% increase in analysis and in devising mental maps to guide future actions. This is the hypothetical analyzer style. Not a lot of change. What there is likely to have been used in supporting the increased action-oriented logical processor change that we just saw. Figuring out the kind of input to pay attention to, or in plotting a course to stay sober today. Well, are we dealing here with real changes, or are these just statistical flukes in the numbers? The way you figure out something like that is with statistical significance tests. all of the major changes in the profiles from short to midterm sobriety meet the academic tests of significance. That means that these changes are no accident. Some common factor underlies them. So, what's causing it? Well, the formula is spelled out in the first 10 steps of the 12-step AA process. All of them are directly targeted at getting control of immediate behavior. That is exactly what we saw in the graphics that we have just reviewed. There is not enough time in this video to show exactly how each of these steps work, but you can read about them in detail in the Applied Research blog on IOP.com. Just look for the 12-step citation. Well, we are halfway there. The increase in the disciplined logical processor style has equipped our recovering alcoholic to handle today's situations. But what about the future? What about situations that have not yet happened and in which there is no experience? This is taken care of in the second phase of the recovery process. Here is the profile of midterm sobriety, 1 to 3 years without a drink. And here is the profile of long-term sobriety, more than 3 years without alcohol. Let's put them together and measure the change. And here is what happened. The impulsive RS style declined still more. The fall is smaller than the 21% drop we saw in phase 1. But given the high RS level, 9% still matters. The idea-oriented RI fell by 4% in phase 1. Now it declines by 15%, a notable change. So, what are the styles that increased? The disciplined action LP style does not increase at all in phase 2. It looks like managing immediate behavior was mastered in phase 1. The analytical HA strategy has rocketed up 36% in phase 2. Assessment, evaluation, and planning are getting the attention. These are things that help the recovering alcoholic navigate a future that has not yet arrived. Phase 2 seems to be future-focused. But again, are these changes real or just random variations? The significance tests tell us that the changes in phase 2 are real. The instant action RS style did drop further, and the analytical HA did rocket up. These are not statistical flukes. The 15% drop in the idea-oriented relational innovator strategy is a different story. This is not statistically significant. It could be just a random variation. It appears that changes in idea generation are not a major part of the recovery process. So, what drove this second stage effect? That can be found in the last 2 steps of the 12-step process. These turn attention from doing to thinking. As before, these are examined in more detail in the Applied Research blog. In summary, the first 10 steps focused on immediate behavior. That powered the move from short to midterm sobriety. The change revolved around increasing disciplined action, an approach that tells you what to do in a particular situation. The last 2 steps expand the ability to diagnose, assess, and plan. These are tools needed to guide future behavior under conditions that have not yet been experienced. The change from short to long-term sobriety creates a new way of looking at the world, and that total change can be measured. This chart shows the original short-term and the final long-term profiles on the same chart. The percentages are the amount of time a person is likely to use a strategy in navigating life. Recovery involves changing the use distribution of these strategies, not dropping or adding them. So, what styles increased in use? The disciplined LP and the analytical HA. A 43% increase for the LP and a 51% for the HA. Big changes. And what declined? The quick-acting RS fell 28%, and that's 28% from a high base. In other words, it is 28% of a big original number. The idea-generating RI also fell. This RI change is a bit less certain since it failed to meet academic levels of significance, but its use probably did decline. Now, does sobriety mean that there has been a total transformation? Well, take a look. I think it's fair to say that the worldview of the recovered alcoholic has changed. This video has shown that the 2-stage recovery process is due to the nature and sequencing of the 12 steps. But are the steps all that was needed? The answer is no. Alcoholics Anonymous is a system, not a formula. It has many tools and the steps are just one. There are rituals, slogans like fake it till you make it, and new vocabulary with words like acceptance, humility, and powerlessness. Here is an example of how one ritual works. The standard AA salutation of "I am an alcoholic" resets expectations, both for the alcoholic themselves and for those hearing them. This gives the recovering alcoholic the personal and social latitude to change their strategy. This t-shirt is another example. It is a definition. Definitions can set expectations. Expectations signal the kind of information that is to be sought and accepted. Defining things in different ways changes the information you've got, the way you process it, and the likely outcome, a behavior. These and other supportive processes just don't happen anywhere. They happen at an AA meeting. The meeting is a critical structural component of the recovery process. Social interactions happen during meetings. They help set up new support and corrective systems. Chats can provide guidance, and they can become something of a commitment as the recovering alcoholic agrees to try this or that. These implied commitments also come in bunches. Each different interaction can add strength to a new strategy. Each interaction improves the odds of continued sobriety. Now, meetings have many more functions, but meetings themselves are not enough. There is still a structural element missing, and that missing piece is the sponsor. The sponsor's role is to help the alcoholic stay sober in whatever way is right for that person, that particular situation, and for the sponsor themselves. In other words, it is a two-party relationship in which both sides must connect. When people connect, words mean the same things to both people. Underlying beliefs roughly correspond. Goals are approached in about the same way. In other words, conversations can focus on the subject, unburdened by interpretation issues. Now, there are many things involved in establishing a connection between people, but in information processing terms, these involve matching the fundamental input, process, and output styles of both people. IOP technology has a way of measuring structural compatibility. It involves overlapping profiles. This gives a foretaste of what is going to happen in a relationship. Any overlap can work. However, there must be enough commonality for the parties to connect. Ideally, the people should be different enough so that the sponsor broadens the perspective of the recovering alcoholic. In our work with non-alcoholics, an overlap in the range of about 30 to 50% yields this kind of result. There is no assurance that a particular degree and direction of overlap will work. The IOP paradigm only talks about transmission mediums, not content, and the content does count. However, in a low overlap like this one, misunderstandings and other difficulties are a virtual certainty. From an information processing perspective, the 12 steps, the meetings, and sponsorship are the structural elements of the AA system. But there is one more thing that merits note: the 12 traditions. The 12 traditions are what protects the system itself. Without them, AA would have collapsed long ago. The traditions can be seen as a system of firewalls. They act to ensure that AA cannot be hijacked or redirected. If you are interested in a detailed examination of the traditions, just go to the Organizational Factors blog in the Applied Research section of IOP.com. So, what have we learned from this study? We now know that the recovery from alcoholism is a two-stage process. An initial increase in the use of reasoned choice was followed by a major expansion in assessment, evaluation, and planning capacity. We traced these results to the structure and content of the 12 steps. And then we said that, standing alone, the 12 steps are not enough. Meetings are needed to help break patterns by providing guidance, positive support, and resetting expectations. And sponsors are required to provide an on-demand touchstone of advice, counsel, and sometimes even physical support. The 12 steps, meetings, and sponsorship form the structural framework for the AA. Remove any one and the recovery process will be seriously compromised. And finally, the traditions act as a firewall to make sure that AA continues to be there as long as it is needed. In total, this study has shown that the worldview of the recovering alcoholic changes in predictable, explainable, and substantial ways. And what was the benefit of the study? To quote the business sage Warren Buffett, "Risk comes from not knowing what you're doing." We now know more about what we're doing.